What's going on, guys? It's New York Prepper here, and I wanted to do this very important video about the fall of this year, 2020, that I believe could potentially be a major SHTF for us as Americans and everybody around the world. I think this fall is going to be very bad. I think there's a convergence of a lot of different things happening at once this fall. And I think there's a high potential for SHTF and maybe even the beginning of the apocalypse. Who knows? Um, but I wanted to just share some information I have here on my whiteboard. And I am carrying my pistol and I'm in my bunker, but I still carry my weapon with me. Okay, I tell everybody to carry their weapon when they're around their house, especially now it's late at night. So I want to always have a weapon on me, especially late at night down here. So I don't want to be a hypocrite and tell people to carry their weapons if I'm not carrying it. But definitely carry your weapon, guys. There's no reason for you to keep it inside of your safe. It's not going to do you any good inside of your safe, okay? Especially now with the coronavirus crisis. You want to have your weapon ready to go, ready to deploy, all right? So that's what I want to just mention before I start the video. So we have fall 2020 SHTF, okay? And here I just have a list of things that I want to discuss with you guys and why I think we're going to head into an SHTF in the fall time. All right, so first of all, we have the second wave, okay, which everybody's talking about. And what's important to know about the second wave is that during the Spanish flu, it was actually the second wave that was more deadly than the first wave, okay? The first wave primarily affected elderly people and people with weakened immune systems or people with pre-existing conditions, okay? So a lot of people think that we're out of the woods with the virus already because we're about to, reopen the country. And that's just not the case, okay? If you look at history and, if history repeats itself and, the coronavirus follows the same thing as the Spanish flu, then we could be looking at multiple waves, okay? The Spanish flu lasted for 3 or 4 waves, actually. The first wave started in the spring of 1918, and the second wave came back in the fall time in October. October 1918 was the deadliest month for the Spanish flu. All right, during October of 1918, that's when probably at least 20 or 50 million people died in that 1 month. Okay, so it seems to me like history is repeating itself because we're just getting out of the first wave. We started in the spring, just like with the Spanish flu, which started in the spring also. And same thing with the first wave. Back then everybody thought the virus was over, and then it came back with a vengeance in the fall time, okay, in October. And that's when like I said, the deadliest month for the Spanish flu was October 1918, okay? And then there was also a third wave in the spring of 1919. Okay, so you had the first wave in the spring of 1918, which only affected elderly people or people with pre-existing conditions, weakened immune systems. Then you had the deadly second wave, which happened in October of 1918. Then you had another wave in 1919 in the springtime. Okay. And actually, there was actually a fourth wave in some areas of the United States and around the world. In more populated areas like New York City, they experienced a fourth wave, okay? So it took over a year and a half for all the waves of the Spanish flu to, pass through the world, okay? And what they're saying now with this virus is that the first wave in many countries, only 5% of the population was actually exposed to the virus. So if only 5% of the population was exposed, it's going to be, there's a lot of people out there that are still susceptible to the virus, okay, which gives the ability for the virus to come back again. And again, we don't know if this virus, if you can even build immunity to it. There's reports in South Korea and multiple countries of people getting sick again after 2 months, with no symptoms. They suddenly test positive and symptoms start to come back after 2 months. Okay, so we don't even know, if this virus was engineered in a lab in Wuhan, okay, which it seems to be that it was engineered. We had that revelation about Dr. Fauci, who his department at the National Institutes of Health donated millions of dollars to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is coincidentally just a couple of kilometers away from the wet market where the mainstream media says the virus originated from. But Fauci and his team funded experimentation with coronaviruses to try to make them more virulent. And I believe that they were trying to create a cure for HIV, possibly, by combining HIV with the coronavirus and then making a vaccine for that chimera virus, which would potentially work for also HIV. All right, but that's just my theory. But nonetheless, this is a virus that's not a normal natural virus from what we see. It spreads all over in different ways. So we know that it can spread through fecal matter. We know now that it can be found in male sperm. We know that it can be found in the bloodstream. We know that it attacks the kidneys, the heart, not just the lungs, but all kinds of organs with ACE2 receptors. So even if you believe that even if there was a herd immunity, we still only have reached 5% exposure levels in many countries. So we're not even anywhere near herd immunity. And then the question is, can we even reach herd immunity? Is that possible? All right. And like I said, if this virus is, a biological weapon, or if it was engineered in a lab, it's going to be hard for us to get immunity because it was engineered in such a way to be the perfect weapon. So in that case, it's going to be impossible to get immunity, right? So that's, just the virus now. So that's the second wave, okay? Second wave. And then the second wave is going to coincide with other problems over here. But so, we still have the second wave to deal with, all right? And again, like I said, Spanish flu, the second wave was more deadly. And actually, the second wave, the reason why the second wave was worse than the first wave is because of the field hospitals during World War I. You had soldiers during World War I that got infected, all right? And they got infected with a stronger version of the virus. And those soldiers were put into crowded field hospitals. And as a result, the virus, spread from those field hospitals because it was like a breeding ground for that stronger, more virulent version of the virus, because they were packing all those people, all the soldiers that got the stronger version of it. And most of them were actually younger guys. And that's the main difference between the second wave of the Spanish flu and the first wave of the Spanish flu, is that the second wave not only affected elderly people, but it affected everybody, including young people, all right? People such as myself, which you would consider to be at the peak of my, the peak of my life, in terms of my physical capabilities, okay? Even people like me could be affected, all right? And right now, with the virus now, it's mostly affecting elderly, so there's a lot of parallels between what we're going through now and what happened with the Spanish flu, okay? So if that's the case, if that happens, with us, with this virus, and we start to get a lot of young people sick, that's going to be a lot worse and a lot more deadly than obviously what we went through now. And in the first wave of the Spanish flu, it was very similar to what we're going through now. There was only maybe tens of thousands of people that died in the United States. But then the second wave, you're talking about millions upon millions of people that died. And you got to remember, you had a total body count of around 50 million people from the Spanish flu. 50 million people today would be a huge body count, all right? You're talking about the state of New York and the state of California, all the people in those two states totally just vanish. All right, that's 50 million people dead. And even now that would be so catastrophic. But think about back in the day, you're talking about 1918. The world population was only around 2 or 3 billion. All right, we're at 8 billion now. So the U.S. population was probably no more than 200 million people, maybe 150. All right, we're at like 330 million. So there's no way that the U.S. population was more than 150 million. So you're looking at a third of the U.S. population possibly dying from the Spanish flu. That's a huge body count, okay? And obviously back in those times, they couldn't do a proper tally of all the bodies. They didn't have the same technology for, they didn't have they didn't have such a streamlined system for keeping track of dead people and stuff like that, okay? So it's very possible that the body count could have been much higher back then, okay? So, so second wave, all right, we could have a very deadly second wave, just like the Spanish flu, okay? Like I said, the second wave of the Spanish flu affected everybody, not just elderly people. So that could still happen, all right? And again, that's because they crowded all the soldiers, the young guys that were in World War I that got infected in the trenches when they were fighting in Europe. They put them in crowded field hospitals, and then that was like a breeding ground for that stronger, more mutated version of the virus, okay? So second wave, that's obviously a problem. More lockdowns, okay? We could get another lockdown. They could easily lock us down again in the fall time in September. We could see martial law. We could see civil unrest. We could see revolution. Okay, so and that's just with the virus. That's not including other things too. All right, so we have the possibility of a second wave with martial law, civil unrest, possible revolution or civil war. If there's going to be more forced lockdowns, if there's going to be more mandatory, let's say, vaccines. Okay, let's say they do a mandatory vaccine. We've already seen people in Michigan protesting. Some of those protests have been starting to get violent because people are mad that they can't open their businesses. People are starting to defy the lockdown orders. There was a woman in Texas that opened up her business when they told her not to, and she actually got arrested for it. And there's so you have resistance to the lockdown, and so we could see revolution, we could see civil war, and those are just some things. We could see martial law. All right, we could, for example, see the government and state governors take a more military approach to the lockdowns, because they may say that, all right, the first time around we weren't tough enough, and so now we really got to be tough, so this way the virus doesn't come back worse, okay? So I think that's a very real possibility. We already have the governor of New York pulling out some statistic out of his butt, as he always does, and he basically said that 66% of the new cases now are because of people that are actually staying home and they're not going anywhere. So, I think that he's getting ready to use that as a justification for stronger lockdown measures, okay? He's going to basically say, all right, guys, the first time around, we didn't really enforce the lockdown. We let you guys travel. We let you guys do things. We let you, we didn't actually crack down that hard. We didn't check what you were doing. This time around, we're going to have National Guard. We're going to have police, state police, checking your papers, making, if you have to go to work, you're going to have papers. They're going to actually enforce it more than they are now, okay? They're going to really, really enforce it much harder than they are right now. That's my opinion, okay? And they're, like I said, they're going to justify it by saying that, they weren't strong enough the first time around, so they have to be harder on us now, okay? And so we could see a stronger lockdown. We could see martial law, shelter-in-place orders, curfews in some areas where you're not going to be able to go out past, 9 p.m. All right, if you guys think it's bad now, wait until they give you a curfew. All right, and they say, all right, guys, nobody's allowed to be on the street after 9 p.m. If you're on the street, you're going to get locked up or you're going to get a ticket. And if you keep doing it, you're going to go to jail. Okay, and we're going to patrol the streets. We're going to patrol the roads with National Guard and police. Okay, there may be a shelter-in-place order where you're not allowed to go outside at all. All right, if you're talking about especially in the big cities where it's easy to enforce something like that. I don't think out in the country it's going to be hard for them to enforce an order like that. But, you know, in the cities, it's much easier for them to enforce something like that, a shelter-in-place order. They could basically say, you know, you guys have to stay in your homes and, you know, you can only go out a couple of days a week. Otherwise, you have to stay in your house. And again, I know a lot of you guys are going to say that that's crazy and that'll never happen. But, you know, I know a lot of people are going to say that this is America, man. That's not going to happen. But guess what, guys? There's been a lot of crazy stuff happening with this virus and people's rights getting trampled. So I don't feel that I think that they're going to try to continue to push and see what they can get away with. All right. So be ready for possible martial law. Shelter-in-place orders, curfews. They may even lock down entire cities and quarantine entire cities if things get really bad. Like if you guys remember, President Trump was considering sealing off in all of New York City and deploying the military so nobody would leave. I think that's a possibility, okay? I think it's a possibility for shelter-in-place orders and things like that, all right? So martial law, obviously more, you know, stronger, more mutated virus. All right. And revolution, civil unrest, looting, crime. Okay. Because we've already seen with the virus an increase in crime because, you know, bad guys are opportunistic and they see that the police are not enforcing the law like they used to because a lot of guys are either out sick or a lot of guys just don't want to come to work. They take vacation or they retire early because they don't want to, you know, work in a situation like this. A lot of police departments and sheriff's offices are not taking calls that are not life-threatening. Okay, so if you, let's say there's a burglary in your house, they may not respond to that right away, or they may divert the call to the state police or something like that, depending on, you know, where you live. But a lot of police departments and a lot of sheriff's offices, especially smaller towns, they're not taking calls the way that they used to because they don't want to get their police force infected. So they're only responding to life-threatening situations, all right? And criminals, you know, they're opportunistic, they're smart, and they're going to take advantage of that, all right? I told you guys in my area already there were car break-ins. There was a car stolen out of somebody's driveway just 2 miles away from me, okay? Literally, a car was stolen out of someone's driveway. And this is not a bad neighborhood. This is a middle class. Even some areas are upper middle class. So that's, you know, very concerning to me. You know, we've seen an increase in domestic violence. So all these things are going to come with the second wave, okay? With lockdowns and everything else, all those other issues are going to stem from that, okay? You know, food shortages, I think that's another thing that we got to consider. You know, we had all those meat packing plants that shut down, you know, and I'm sure that's going to happen again if there's another wave. We're going to see a lot of workers getting infected. Same thing with not just food shortages, but we could see supply shortages of manufacturing goods, okay? If workers can't come to a factory to work, who's going to build things, all right? Who's going to build this pistol that I'm wearing? Who's going to build, you know, your car, okay? Who's going to build car parts, all right? All these things, you need people to build them, and you need factories to be open. And if factories shut down because people are sick and they can't go to work, that's a problem, all right? So food shortages is another problem. So we got the second wave, which is going to have possible martial law, possible civil unrest or revolutions if there's a mandatory vaccine or, you know, crazy restrictive lockdown measures. You know, we could see that. You know, I think I think that crime on the rise. Okay, this second wave alone is going to do a lot of damage to our country. All right, with all the other problems that come along with it. Um, Food shortages and supply shortages, okay, due to workers getting infected, and that could lead to famine, which, this right here, food shortages and famine, that's going to make people act crazy. All right, once people can't have enough food to eat because the grocery stores are empty, that's when they're going to really start to act crazy. All right, that's when people are going to revert to their primal nature, and it's going to be every man for himself, okay, at that point. So this right here can really make people go crazy, okay? So food shortages could lead to famine, and that could cause chaos and, violence, okay? We could, like I said, see civil unrest. People may rise up and start to burn things down like we saw in Lebanon. In Lebanon, the people, they didn't have enough money to buy food, and there was no food in the stores, so they ran into the streets and they burned down all the banks and all the government offices. All right, so that's something that we got to consider. Economic depression and the economy, that's another big one. All right, that's really big, and we're already in a depression now, I believe, okay, at the time of this video, which is May 17th, 2020. I believe we're already in a depression. I just think that the federal government and the Department of Labor, they don't want to admit that there's such a high unemployment rate because they want to control the panic and control the fear. So, that's their big thing, okay? Just like with this virus, from the beginning of the virus, everything was about information control. That's what the government does, okay? They want to control information, all right? They're not going to really tell you the real economic statistics, okay? They're always going to try to minimize it as much as possible because they don't want you to know the truth, because then you're going to freak out and people are going to panic, okay? So I personally believe we're already in a depression, and that's just my opinion. I think we're in the beginnings of a depression right now. Our unemployment rate is the highest it's ever been since the Great Depression, and they're actually saying that the unemployment rate is going to go above the levels that we saw during the Great Depression. Okay, so that's a concern. We have the economy, which obviously, depression and economy tie in together. We have another bailout that's going to be possibly passed and signed by the president as of the timing of this video. We had the first bailout, which was the CARES Act, which gave everybody a $1,200 check and added $600 a week to unemployment benefits. So the next one that the House of Representatives just passed is the HEROES Act, which is going to do basically the same thing. It's going to extend unemployment until January 2021. All right, guys? So why would they extend unemployment until 2021 if they don't expect another lockdown? All right? They're obviously anticipating or planning another lockdown again. That's why they're going to extend the unemployment until January 2021. That's just my opinion, all right? I think that they already know that they're going to have to lock down again. So that's why they're trying to pass this law, the HEROES Act, all right? And that's going to go until January 2021. It's going to extend unemployment benefits. It's going to do another $1,200 for everybody in the country. So, all that's going to add another $3 trillion in debt to our total debt load. All right, the previous bailout was already like $3 trillion. So here's another $3 trillion on top of that. That's $6 trillion. And we already have like 10 or 20 trillion in debt. So our debt is going to be massive, all right, after these two bailouts. And, just the economic problems that are going to arise from the virus and from the lockdowns, they're going to last for many, many years. And it could cause SHTF. It could cause, chaos. If people can't afford to buy things, or They don't have the money to pay their bills. There's a lot of people that are not getting their benefits yet because it's a slow process. There's a lot of people that lose their jobs and they have to apply for unemployment, and it takes time for the paperwork and everything else. So this could lead to a lot of people getting crazy if they can't get their benefits and, they don't have enough money to eat and stuff like that. That's where we could see potential problems. All right. So, elections. All right. We have an election year coming up. All right. So if this wasn't enough, all right, second wave, food shortages, depression, we also have an election year. Okay. And that just adds more stuff and more problems. All right. Are we going to have an election? Is the election going to be postponed? All right. Are they going to declare martial law in order to reelect the president for another couple of years? All right. We had that happen during World War II where FDR served a third term because of the war. Okay. So, we have an election year, and election years, you always have crazy things happen. So that's going to motivate politicians to behave a certain way. All right. So election year just adds more trouble to to already what's going on. There's going to be a lot of partisanship. There's going to be a lot of back and forth between the parties. We could see all kinds of sketchy things going on. Okay. So, and so that alone is going to be crazy. If we actually go through with the election, then we're talking about, possibly, riots and things like that. All right. If we have different political groups, we may see Antifa come out and some of those other, fringe elements. So, this is an absolute critical election, guys. All right. They want to get rid of Donald Trump as much as they can. And I believe that there's going to be a lot of extremist groups that are going to come out during the election season. And they may riot. They may do all kinds of stuff. All right. So election year on top of that, we may not even have an election year. All right. Our president may get reelected. We have La Nina. Okay. La Nina. We're going to have more hurricanes and more snow and cold. So we're heading into a La Nina pattern. La Nina just means that it has to do with the trade winds around the earth. And the La Nina could cause a colder winter and more snowy winter across the world, especially the hurricane season, especially in the United States. The La Nina favors stronger hurricane season. So we may have we also have hurricane season coming up as well. All right. So hurricane season, in addition to the La Nina, it could be a very bad hurricane season. All right. We also have a solar minimum. All right. We're in the middle of a solar minimum, which could cause, colder winters and, a possible mini ice age. Okay. And then we also have Iran, Russia, and China and Korea to deal with. Okay. And these are always a threat. Okay. Iran, Russia, China, Korea, these are always a threat. We had China recently threaten to attack Taiwan. We had Iran, threatening the U.S. already. So, this is always a threat. Iran could potentially strike the world's oil supply like they did last year, where they dropped bombs on Saudi Arabia. And that's the last thing that we need, is for Iran to drop bombs and wipe out the world's oil supply in the Middle East. All right. Possibly World War III. Okay. We could have World War III. So there's some other things I wanted to also mention here. So here I'm just going to write martial law. Martial law revolution. Okay, rioting, civil unrest. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Martial law, revolution, rioting, civil unrest, mandatory vaccines. Okay, possible mandatory vaccination. Okay, on a mass level. All right, we may have the mark of the beast. Okay, I forgot to mention that. Mark of the beast. Okay. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Maybe I'll just pull this up a little closer. All right, so mandatory vaccines, mark of the beast, martial law, revolution, rioting, civil unrest, crime. All right, let me add crime in here. Okay. Loss of the dollar. All right, the loss of dollar. The dollar could go down. We could have a global currency. Global currency. Okay, global currency, loss of the dollar. The IMF could potentially have to bail out, all these different countries. Food shortages. We could see rioting. Rioting, looting. Okay. Elections, La Nina. We have colder winter, and then also World War III. Let me put World War III on the bottom here. Okay. World War III. Okay. So, it's going to be a busy year, guys. Okay. So please prepare yourselves. Okay. Do whatever you need to do to get ready. All right. Time is running out. I don't think we're going to get out of the lockdown. I think there's going to be a temporary release of the lockdown, but I don't think it's going to be a permanent release. I think they're going to temporarily open things up to make people feel better, but I don't think it's going to be like a long-term release of the lockdown. All right, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I don't see them. They have so much power already. They're not going to give that up. Okay, so. Let me move this back now because there's a shadow on the camera here. All right. So, so be ready, guys. Okay. We could have a total SHTF situation. All right. So again, be ready. Fill in the gaps in all your preps. Take care. God bless. And don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.